Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared at the rejection letter in her trembling hands. The words blurred through her tears, but she had already memorized every cruel sentence. Your physical limitations make you unsuitable for military service. Application denied. It was the third rejection in 2 months, each one hitting harder than the last. The 22-year-old had been born with a rare muscle condition that affected her left leg, causing a slight limp that became more pronounced when she was tired or stressed. Doctors had told her parents she might never walk normally, but Maria had proved them wrong through years of physical therapy and sheer determination. She had learned to compensate so well that most people never noticed her condition unless they looked closely. Growing up in a small Texas town, Maria had always dreamed of serving her country. Her grandfather had fought in World War II, her uncle in Vietnam, and her older brother was currently deployed overseas. Military service wasn't just a career choice for her family. It was a calling, a way to honor their heritage and give back to the nation that had given them so much when they immigrated from Mexico 3 generations ago. But the military medical examiners saw only her weakness, not her strength. They focused on her limp, not her perfect marksmanship scores from the local shooting range. They noted her slower running time, not her exceptional scores on written exams or her ability to lead others under pressure. Every recruiter she met seemed to make up their mind the moment they saw her walk through the door. The rejection from the Army had been the most devastating. The recruiting sergeant, a gruff man with cold eyes, had barely looked at her test scores before shaking his head. "The Army needs soldiers who can keep up," he had said dismissively. "We can't have someone who might slow down the unit or become a liability in the field." His words echoed in her mind for weeks afterward. Maria's family tried to comfort her, suggesting she pursue other careers where she could make a difference. Her mother encouraged her to become a teacher. Her father thought she should use her intelligence for engineering or medicine. But Maria felt a deep emptiness whenever she imagined herself in any other profession. The military wasn't just what she wanted to do. It was who she was meant to be. She had studied military history since she was a child, memorizing famous battles and strategies. She understood weapons systems, tactical planning, and military law better than most recruits who were accepted without question. Her academic achievements were outstanding, her leadership skills proven through years of community involvement and volunteer work. Yet none of that seemed to matter when weighed against her physical limitation. The small apartment she shared with her roommate became a prison of self-doubt. Maria stopped going out with friends, stopped attending the weekly family dinners that had always been sacred in the Santos household. She spent her days applying for civilian jobs she didn't want, going through the motions of building a life she had never planned to live. Her bank account was dwindling rapidly, and the pressure to find employment was mounting. The rejection letters were piling up on her desk, each one a reminder of doors being slammed in her face. Some responses were form letters that didn't even acknowledge her qualifications. Others were more personal but equally crushing, with recruiters explaining that while they admired her determination, military regulations were clear about physical standards. One evening, as Maria sat alone in her apartment eating a microwave dinner, she noticed a news report about women breaking barriers in the military. The story featured several female officers who had overcome various challenges to serve their country with distinction. One was the first woman to complete a particularly demanding special operations course. Another had returned to duty after recovering from serious injuries sustained in combat. These women spoke about facing discrimination and doubt, about being told they weren't strong enough or tough enough for military service. But they had persevered, finding ways to prove their worth and earn respect through their actions rather than their appearance. Maria felt a spark of hope listening to their stories, but it was quickly extinguished by the reality of her own situation. These women had been given chances to prove themselves. She wasn't even being allowed through the front door. The next morning brought another rejection, this time from the Marines. The letter was particularly harsh, suggesting that she was wasting everyone's time by continuing to apply. Maria crumpled the paper and threw it across the room, finally, letting out the frustration and anger she had been holding inside for months. She screamed until her throat was raw, then collapsed onto her bed and cried until there were no tears left. Her phone rang constantly that day. Her mother, her brother calling from overseas, friends who had heard about the latest rejection. But Maria couldn't bring herself to answer. She felt like a failure, someone who had been foolish to dream beyond her limitations. The optimism and determination that had carried her through years of physical therapy and academic achievement seemed to have evaporated completely. As the sun set on what felt like the worst day of her life, Maria made a decision that surprised even herself. She would make one more attempt, but this time she would aim higher than ever before. If she was going to fail again, she might as well fail while reaching for something extraordinary. She had heard about a special military program that was supposedly more merit-based, one that valued intelligence and leadership as much as physical capability. The program was highly competitive and rarely accepted applicants with any kind of medical history that might be considered problematic. But Maria had nothing left to lose. She spent the entire night crafting her application, pouring her heart into essays about why she wanted to serve and what she could contribute to the military. She included letters of recommendation from community leaders, transcripts showing her academic excellence, and documentation of every leadership role she had ever held. When she finished at dawn, Maria felt a mixture of exhaustion and nervous energy. This application represented her last real chance to achieve her dream. If this failed, she would have to accept that her military aspirations were truly impossible and find a way to build a meaningful life in the civilian world. But for now, she still had hope, fragile and desperate though it might be. The application process was more rigorous than anything she had encountered before. There were multiple rounds of testing, both written and practical. Physical assessments were included, but they seemed to be just one component among many rather than the sole determining factor she had encountered elsewhere. Maria threw herself into the preparation, spending every waking hour studying, exercising, and practicing for whatever challenges might lie ahead. Weeks passed without word, and Maria began to assume this attempt had failed like all the others. She started seriously looking at civilian career options, even scheduling interviews for jobs that held no interest for her. The hope that had sustained her through the application process was slowly fading, replaced by a resigned acceptance of her limitations. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning that seemed no different from any other, everything changed. The phone rang at exactly 9:30 in the morning, jarring Maria from her half-hearted job search on the computer. She almost didn't answer, expecting another telemarketer or perhaps her mother checking in again. But something made her reach for the phone, and the voice on the other end changed everything. "Miss Santos, this is Colonel Patricia Williams from the Special Assessment Division. I'm calling regarding your recent application for the Advanced Leadership Program." The woman's voice was crisp and professional, giving nothing away. "We'd like you to report to Fort Stevens for a comprehensive evaluation next Monday morning at 0600 hours. Maria's heart pounded so hard she was sure the colonel could hear it through the phone. "Ah, yes, ma'am. I'll be there." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Excellent. You'll find detailed instructions and a map in the packet we're sending via overnight delivery." "Miss Santos," the colonel paused. "Bring everything you have. This evaluation will determine your future in ways you can't yet imagine." The line went dead, leaving Maria staring at the phone in disbelief. After months of rejection and disappointment, someone was actually giving her a chance. She spent the rest of the day in a strange combination of excitement and terror, alternating between confident preparation and paralyzing doubt about what lay ahead. The packet arrived the next morning, containing more paperwork than she had seen for all her previous applications combined. The instructions were detailed and somewhat ominous, mentioning physical challenges, psychological assessments, and leadership scenarios that would test her limits. But what caught her attention most was a small note attached to the main documents. "Your academic achievements and community leadership record are exceptional. We're interested in seeing what else you're capable of." Maria arrived at Fort Stevens before dawn on Monday, her stomach churning with nervous energy. The base was larger and more imposing than she had expected, with serious-faced guards and an atmosphere of barely contained intensity. She was directed to a nondescript building where she found herself in a waiting room with 11 other candidates, all of whom looked supremely confident and physically impressive. The other applicants were a mix of military academy graduates, former enlisted personnel seeking officer training, and civilians like herself who had somehow earned this opportunity. They sized each other up with the competitive intensity of athletes before a championship game. Maria felt incredibly out of place among these obvious high achievers, her slight limp suddenly seeming more pronounced under their scrutinizing gazes. Colonel Williams appeared precisely on schedule, a tall woman with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She looked each candidate up and down without comment, her expression revealing nothing about what she was thinking. When her gaze fell on Maria, it lingered just long enough to make her self-conscious about her obvious physical difference. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most challenging evaluation of your lives. The colonel began without preamble. Over the next 5 days, you will be tested in ways that will reveal not just your capabilities, but your character. Some of you will exceed your own expectations. Others will discover limitations you never knew existed. Only a handful will earn advancement to the final phase of this program. The first day focused on academic and analytical challenges that played to Maria's strengths. Complex problem-solving scenarios, strategic planning exercises, and written assessments that covered everything from military history to international relations. She found herself in her element, drawing upon years of study and natural intellectual ability to tackle problems that left some other candidates struggling. During lunch, she overheard 2 former military academy graduates discussing her performance with obvious surprise and some resentment. "How is the girl with the limp doing better than people who trained for this their whole lives?" one muttered. The comment stung, but it also fueled her determination to prove that her mind was more powerful than any physical limitation. The second day brought physical challenges that Maria had been dreading. Obstacle courses, endurance tests, and combat simulations designed to push everyone to their breaking point. She struggled more than the others, her modified gait making certain obstacles particularly difficult. But she noticed that the evaluators were taking notes about her problem-solving approach and determination as much as her completion times. When she fell behind during a particularly grueling run, Maria expected to be eliminated on the spot. Instead, she found herself paired with Captain Rodriguez, a combat veteran who had lost his left arm in Afghanistan. He ran alongside her without comment, his presence somehow making her feel less alone in her struggle to keep up. "The colonel wants to see you after evening chow," he told her as they crossed the finish line, well behind the others. His tone was neutral, giving no hint about whether this was good news or the end of her dreams. The meeting with Colonel Williams took place in a small office overlooking the training grounds. The older woman studied Maria's file while she stood at attention, trying not to let her exhaustion show. Finally, the colonel looked up with an expression that was impossible to read. "Your physical performance has been adequate," she said carefully. "But I'm not evaluating you for an infantry position. Your analytical scores are in the top percentile, your leadership assessments are outstanding, and several instructors have noted your ability to motivate others even when struggling yourself." Maria remained silent, afraid that speaking might somehow jinx this moment. However, the colonel continued, "There are concerns about whether you can handle the physical demands of military service, regardless of your specific role. Tomorrow's exercises will be particularly challenging. I need to see that you won't become a liability to yourself or others in high-stress situations." That night, Maria barely slept. She knew tomorrow would determine everything, and the pressure was overwhelming. She thought about calling her family, but decided against it. This was something she had to face alone. The third day dawned gray and cold, matching her mood perfectly. The physical challenges were indeed more intense than anything she had faced before. But something had changed in how the other candidates treated her. Word had spread about her academic performance, and several offered encouragement or practical advice for handling specific obstacles. When she struggled with a rope climb that aggravated her leg condition, the candidate who had been most dismissive of her on the first day suddenly appeared beside her. "Use your core more than your legs," he advised quietly. "Pull with your arms and let your body do the work." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything in that moment. The day's final challenge was a leadership scenario where each candidate had to guide a team through a complex mission simulation. When Maria's turn came, she found herself in charge of the same people who had initially dismissed her capabilities. The scenario involved evacuating civilians from a hostile area while managing limited resources and conflicting priorities. Drawing upon everything she had studied about military leadership and crisis management, Maria quickly assessed the situation and began issuing clear, logical instructions. When team members questioned her decisions, she explained her reasoning rather than simply demanding obedience. When the simulation threw unexpected complications their way, she adapted quickly while keeping the team focused on their primary objectives. The exercise concluded with a successful mission completion and, something Maria hadn't expected, genuine respect from her teammates. They had seen her think clearly under pressure and make decisions that kept everyone safe while accomplishing their goals. Her physical limitations hadn't mattered when her mind was fully engaged in solving complex problems. Colonel Williams observed everything from a raised platform, taking notes, and occasionally speaking into a radio headset. When the exercise ended, she called Maria aside once again. "Interesting performance today," she said, her tone still giving nothing away. "Your team completed their mission faster than any other group, with no casualties and minimal resource expenditure. They've also specifically requested to work with you again if given the opportunity." Maria felt a surge of hope, but tried to keep her expression neutral. "Report to Building 7 tomorrow morning at 0500 hours, the colonel continued. "There's someone who wants to meet you before we proceed with the final evaluation phase. Don't be late, and don't let me down." As Maria walked back to her temporary quarters, she felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in months. Someone believed in her abilities enough to give her chances she had never thought possible. Whatever tomorrow brought, she was ready to face it with everything she had. Maria arrived at Building 7 15 minutes early, her nerves stretched tight with anticipation and worry. The structure was different from the others on the base, older, more formal, with an air of serious importance that made her straighten her posture automatically. The guard at the entrance checked her identification twice before directing her to a waiting area furnished with heavy wooden chairs and military portraits dating back decades. At exactly 5 o'clock, the door opened and Colonel Williams emerged, but she wasn't alone. Behind her walked a man whose presence immediately commanded attention. He was tall and lean, probably in his early 60s, with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The stars on his uniform indicated a rank that made Maria's heart race with nervous energy. "Miss Santos," Colonel Williams said formally, "I'd like you to meet General Thomas Harrison, Commander of Strategic Development Operations." Maria snapped to attention with military precision she had practiced countless times in her bedroom mirror, hoping her voice wouldn't betray her nervousness. "Good morning, General Harrison, sir." The general studied her for a long moment that felt like hours. His gaze was penetrating but not unkind, as if he were looking past her obvious physical limitation to see something deeper. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an authority that came from decades of command experience. "At ease, Miss Santos. Colonel Williams has been telling me interesting things about your performance this week." He gestured toward the chairs. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss." As they settled into the heavy furniture, General Harrison opened a thick folder that contained what appeared to be Maria's entire life history. Academic transcripts, medical records, letters of recommendation, psychological evaluations from the past few days, and detailed reports from each challenge she had faced. "I've been following your case since your application first crossed my desk," he began, causing Maria's eyes to widen in surprise. "Your academic credentials are exceptional, your leadership potential is obvious, and your determination is remarkable. But I won't lie to you. There are significant concerns about your physical limitations in a military environment." Maria's heart sank, anticipating another rejection despite how far she had come. However, the general continued, raising a hand to stop her from speaking. "I've spent 37 years in the military, and I've learned that our greatest assets aren't always the ones who look the part. Some of our most valuable officers have been people who had to work twice as hard to prove themselves, who understood that strength comes in many forms." He leaned forward, his expression becoming more personal. "Tell me, Miss Santos, why is military service so important to you? And please don't give me a rehearsed answer about serving your country. I want to know what drives you personally." Maria took a deep breath, knowing this moment would shape everything that followed. General, I've always felt like I was meant to solve problems and lead people through difficult situations. When I was younger, my physical condition made me different, and I learned that being different meant I had to find creative solutions that others might miss. The military needs people who can think beyond conventional approaches, who can find ways to accomplish missions even when circumstances aren't ideal. She paused, gathering courage for what came next. I've been rejected so many times because people see my limp and assume I'm weak. But my condition has made me stronger in ways that don't show on a physical fitness test. I understand what it means to overcome obstacles, to adapt when things don't go according to plan, and to keep pushing forward when everyone expects you to give up. General Harrison nodded slowly, making notes in the margins of her file. The military has historically been resistant to change, Miss Santos. We've excluded people based on rigid standards that don't always reflect the realities of modern warfare and military operations. But times are changing, and so must we. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds where other candidates were beginning their morning exercises. I'm going to tell you something that few people know. 20 years ago, I nearly ended my own military career because I questioned a superior's decision to exclude a highly qualified candidate due to what I considered an irrelevant physical characteristic. I was told to fall in line or face consequences for my career. The general turned back to face Maria, his expression serious but determined. I chose to fall in line then, and I've regretted it ever since. That candidate went on to serve with distinction in civilian roles, but we lost someone who could have contributed enormously to military operations. I won't make that mistake again. Colonel Williams, who had been silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke. General Harrison has been developing a new program designed to identify and utilize talents that our traditional recruitment methods often overlook. It's a pilot initiative that could change how we evaluate potential officers. The Advanced Strategic Leadership Track, General Harrison explained, returning to his seat. It's designed for individuals who possess exceptional analytical abilities, innovative thinking skills, and natural leadership qualities, regardless of whether they meet every traditional physical standard. Graduates would serve in planning, intelligence, strategic development, and command support roles where mental capabilities are more critical than physical performance. Maria felt her heart racing as the implications became clear. Are you saying? I'm saying that I want you to be the first candidate accepted into this program, General Harrison stated directly. It won't be easy. You'll face skepticism from traditionalists who believe military service requires conformity to established physical standards. You'll have to prove yourself constantly and exceed expectations in every area where you excel. The weight of the opportunity was overwhelming. After months of rejection and disappointment, someone was not only offering her a chance, but creating a new path specifically designed to utilize her strengths rather than focus on her limitations. There will be additional training requirements, Colonel Williams added. Modified physical conditioning that works with your abilities rather than against them, specialized courses in strategic planning and analysis, and leadership development that prepares you for command roles where your unique perspective will be valued. General Harrison closed the file and looked directly into Maria's eyes. This is uncharted territory for all of us. If you accept this opportunity, you'll be pioneering a new approach to military service that could open doors for countless others who have been excluded by outdated standards. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Maria thought about all the rejection letters, all the recruiters who had dismissed her without truly considering her capabilities, all the nights she had wondered if her dreams were impossible. Now she was being offered not just acceptance, but the chance to change the entire system for others like herself. Yes, sir, she said firmly, her voice strong and clear. I'm ready to prove that strength comes in many forms, and that the military's greatest asset is the diversity of minds and perspectives we bring to serving our country. General Harrison smiled for the first time since entering the room. Outstanding. Colonel Williams will handle your formal acceptance paperwork and arrange your assignment to the Strategic Development Operations Division. You'll begin specialized training next month at the War College, where you'll be among the top strategic minds in the military. As Maria signed the documents that would change her life forever, she thought about her grandfather who had fought in World War II, her uncle who had served in Vietnam, and her brother currently deployed overseas. She was about to join their legacy of service, but in a way that honored both tradition and innovation. 6 months later, Lieutenant Maria Santos stood before a group of new recruits, sharing her story and explaining the various paths available for military service. Among the audience sat several young people with disabilities who had never imagined they could serve their country in uniform. Her presence alone was proof that determination and capability could overcome any limitation when the right opportunity presented itself. The program General Harrison had created expanded rapidly, attracting candidates who brought fresh perspectives and innovative solutions to military challenges. Maria's success became a model for others, demonstrating that true strength lay not in conforming to traditional expectations, but in maximizing each person's unique potential in service of their nation.